Welcome to the We Hack Purple podcast, where each week we meet a different person that works within the information security industry to learn about their jobs, to learn about what it's like to have that type of career, how they got there, and more importantly, is this type of career right for you? We learn all the cool secrets about what's the most fun, what's the least fun, if it pays well or not. This week is sponsored by ThreadFix, powered by Denim Group. And as usual, we are extremely grateful for their constant support. We Hack Purple is a training academy, an online community, and a podcast, and so much more. If you want to learn about application security, we are your people. But that's not what you came here to hear. You wanted to meet Swathi Joshi, our guest today. And so without further ado, let's meet her. Welcome, Swathi.
Hi, Tanya. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show. Part of being a podcast host means I get to meet all sorts of awesome humans. And also, I just realized I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Tanya, Janca, your host. So could you tell us what your job title is and a little bit about your super cool job?
Of course, I'm currently engineering manager, detection and response at Netflix. So that's within the overall Netflix information security team. I lead a group of extremely passionate, experienced security professionals. There are 3 sub-teams and functions within the overall detection and response umbrella. That's the security incident response team, detection engineering team, and the threat intel function.
That's really cool. So people that have seen lots of episodes of the show know I'm really interested in instant response. But I'd really love to hear more about detection because that is not something we've covered. Could you give us maybe just like a little overview of what each of those topics mean for people that don't know?
Yeah, great idea. So like you said, security incident response is kind of often, you see that in the news. It's the most visible portion of some of the information security programs. So the security incident response team handles the inevitable security incidents that come up. We also build our crisis automation tooling and workflow. We do incident preparedness, before an incident happens, like how are we going to handle this? Crisis communications, incident commander training, doing various tabletops, all of that is under the security incidents response team umbrella. On the detection engineering side, detection engineering is focused on building a unified and scalable detection system which can help us effectively identify and respond to attacker activities as well as malicious signals. And on the other side, threat intel is a totally different lens, right? Intelligence function tries to understand the attacker motivations and who and why would, say, someone or a specific entity want to harm Netflix, and what can we do about that?
Seriously though, why would someone want to harm Netflix? I just want to watch all the movies. It's such great content.
No, it's really incredible to be associated with such a great brand, especially a platform that's focused on entertaining the world and storytelling and telling stories from, different walks of life and different regions of the world and things like that. And with that, obviously comes sort of this responsibility on the overall Netflix information security team, where we want to do best for our customers and subscribers. So thanks for loving us, and we love you back.
I was actually, so I give training as part of my job. And this morning I was actually discussing chaos engineering and telling them about Chaos Monkey and how when AWS went down that one time, how Netflix managed to fail over so quickly it stayed up. Is there a chance that you could kind of like tell that story?
I wouldn't be the best person to talk about that, but I think to your point, reliability and resiliency obviously is a core kind of remit of our product and our application.
Yeah.
We obviously want Netflix to be available, and I think on the security side, not just availability, but we also care about confidentiality and integrity of the system, which we want to focus as well in line with availability of the systems.
Exactly. I don't want my embarrassing television addictions to be known to just anyone. It's like, she watches
Yes.
those dumb shows? Yes, I do. So, okay, so could you tell us what a day is like in the life doing your job? Because is it like meetings all day?
It's funny you mentioned that. Lots of meetings, bit of focus time, and then me complaining about not getting enough focus time. But I think joking aside, my role is a real mix of operations, engineering, cross-functional collaboration, and handling, uncertainty. And I think my schedule and my time reflects that. One of the exciting things about incident response is each incident is a new experience. You kind of don't know what the day holds for you. They're unpredictable and obviously, sometimes really exhausting. So maybe I can talk a little bit about how my week looks like.
Yes,
And I'm
yes.
still kind of playing around with this and still tweaking kind of my schedule. Um, my Tuesdays and Thursdays are my meeting heavy days. We have most of our team focused meetings on Tuesday. So that gives me some time to focus on, okay, what are all the things going on? What are the different things that we're working on? On Thursdays, I have my cross-functional meetings, right? Like where we are a very central team. So we meet and work with the various other partners, like our legal partners, our PR partners, our other engineering partners, our studio partners. So Thursday is kind of focused on that. We do org-wide no meeting Wednesdays, which are just great. So Wednesday kind of gives me the much needed focus time. I could do reading, writing, some of the communication that needs to go out, look through all of the backlogs and things like that. Friday mornings are reserved for hiring and writing. Obviously, as the team grows and you want to meet more folks in the industry, so Friday mornings are reserved for that. Mondays and Friday afternoons, I try to have sort of a low-key meeting schedule. That way I can focus on some of the things that come up often.
Oh, that's cool. I really like this idea of no meeting Wednesday. We just kind of started that at my company, except for it
Uh-huh.
only applies to me. And it's
Yes.
it's deep work Thursdays, and no one is allowed to book any meetings with me or anything. And my admin's like, "What? No, no!" And the only thing I do is this, and then just deep work all day. It's awesome. I
Yes.
get so much done.
And I think to your point, that's so great. And obviously it starts kind of with the leader and with you. Um, and I think it's great to have those like coordinated days, right? That way,
Yeah,
if somebody else is not having a no meeting Wednesday, then you need to show up to that meeting. So it's not really a no meeting day for you. So when
yeah,
teams kind of coordinate that, I think it's easier in terms of accountability. And then
yeah,
there's no fear of missing out, right?
yeah.
Everyone's kind of doing focus time. Yeah.
Honestly, if there was a tool that I could buy where, oh, I'm just getting a battery warning on my laptop that's disconcerting. I'm going to check it out after I ask you a question.
For
If there
sure.
was a, if there was a product where it's like Tanya has 4 hours of meetings today, I'm just going to block the rest of her calendar for that day. Wouldn't that be amazing? I would buy that.
Yes. So true.
Listen up.
Yes, this is obviously not a personal endorsement or anything, but I've been using Clockwise. I think that's
Oh,
been really cool because it can dynamically sort of shift your meetings or move stuff around depending on your schedule, to your point. So I think that's been great. How's your battery doing,
very,
Tanya?
very cool. My battery's doing really poor. My battery's
Okay.
not doing so well, but it's okay. I'm going to figure it out because, um, so I actually have like 10 zillion more questions for you. And what I'd like
Yes.
to, so like leading a team is one thing,
Mhm.
but you're not only leading one team, you're leading three essentially,
Mhm.
right? And you you have to know some of what you're doing and
Yeah.
like some of what each team is doing. But I also think that it sounds like there's a certain urgency in the work that you specifically do compared to like
Mhm.
an average manager.
Mhm.
Could you tell me what sorts of personality traits might make someone better at what you do?
Yeah, a really great question. I think there are a couple of things, one being integrity. And I know this is a very generic word, but I think when you're running incident response, fact-based communication and having high integrity while you're running your investigation is really paramount, especially in a very difficult situation. You have multiple people in the incident room. There's cross-functional communications happening. So I think that's kind of one big quality that I see. um, Also, I think accountability is another big one. How do you hold your team accountable, and how does the team hold you accountable? I think it goes obviously both ways. I think that would be that this is, detection response in any organization, I would imagine, is a very active and highly visible role. Which is great for growth, and it gives you a lot of challenges and a lot of room for you to grow into, but also kind of pushes you in terms of leadership, right? Like, how can you really influence other teams, and not really use sort of that authority angle, right? And a lot of times, I think, even with incidents, you don't want a cry wolf type situation, right? Like, you want to respect that level of, like, when it's a high severity incident, only then it's a high severity incident, versus, every time if our team is saying, okay, this is high, then that kind of engagement model, I think, wouldn't be kind of worthwhile. So I think that's something, accountability and integrity. And I think one other big theme you've probably already picked up on is being able to lead and execute under pressure. And I think this is very true for a lot of the other, executive leadership roles as well. Um, so I would say those three things would be essential.
Like important personality traits, period, across the board.
It's so hard to generalize,
No, no,
but I
I
think,
agree.
yeah, yeah. But I think having these three skills will definitely, like, set you up for
I feel like
success.
someone that has those three personality traits is someone that's just going to kick complete butt at whatever they
Yes,
do,
yes,
right? Like,
yes.
like a person that can be counted on to execute and get
Mhm.
things done. Like, we're hiring here. Um, like, that's the type of person you want, right?
Yeah,
Okay. Oh,
absolutely. And I think another point that you mentioned, Tanya, was an interesting one, right? Like, I think you mentioned about leading the team, and you're absolutely right. Like, it's as much as a manager leading the person job, as well as, like, understanding sort of the domain and expertise, right? And I think, to your point, with three different teams, I was really fortunate enough that I joined the team and then moved into the manager role, and I was very
mhm,
familiar with the type of work we're doing because previously I was doing the same. So that transition was much easier for me. um,
mhm.
but I wouldn't say it's that hard if you're doing sort of, other disciplines of security to kind of move into incident response. Wouldn't be that hard.
That's exciting. I have some more questions, but I want to. So there's a question in the chat. I want to welcome everyone that's watching because we have a bunch of people watching. Hello. So someone's asking, I'm just putting it on the screen. So in the last 6 months, which ransomware or types of ransomware have you worked on? And out of them, which one was the most difficult to tackle when it comes to incident response or containment and eradication? Now, if you're not allowed answering this because of your NDA, you can just say, I'm sorry, I can't answer. And that's allowed, just so you know.
Yeah, I think, the first one, the first portion of the question is very targeted. So I'm not going to answer specifically around that. But in general, I think with the Garmin incident that happened, I've been watching that really closely. So that, ransomware has been in existence, and in general, we've seen a rise of that in the industry. I think on the cloud side, it's still evolving, I would say, but in the more traditional environments, it continues to be a big one. I wouldn't want to comment on which is a hard versus the other. I think it really depends on the type of environment that you're in, the type of technologies that you use.
That is cool. I also figured out how to lower my battery usage so
Great.
that my computer doesn't turn off, and that's excellent. I have like a whole bunch of different laptops, and so I guess I thought it would be super smart to plug my plug into a different one and then like let this one languish all day.
Yes.
Anyway, I swear I'm smart. So yeah, so someone in the chat is saying a difficult question for the venue because yeah, we're all under non-disclosure agreements, and if she tells you which ransomware she's been looking at recently, we're just going to assume it has to do with her company. And it kind of sucks sometimes, like working in instant response where you're like, this giant thing happened and I can't tell you.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I do think war stories and sharing that definitely has its place. And I think we can definitely answer that without giving out specifics. And I think you bring up a really great point of how do we weave the narrative really well, right? Like most often, like the first few hours or even minutes of an incident are so crucial because they're mostly a scoping exercise. During initially, like you don't know what's the scope of the incident, what type of like data is involved, and we see that many times throughout the incidents. And I think that's why some of the big news that you'll see through every week, some new information kind of comes out. And that's the nature of like digging. That's the nature of investigation. And that's the nature of kind of weaving that story. So I do think like as a community, there is lots for us to do in terms of like sharing techniques and sharing information. But I think to your point, there's always a fine line of, how much you sort of openly say that's not beneficial, mutually beneficial.
It's hard, right? When I worked for the Canadian government, sometimes they would share information between departments and sometimes they wouldn't.
Yeah.
And I would always find it super confusing because I was a dev for a long time and I would just send my code to another dev in the government. Or I would call my old department and say, hey, you know how I wrote that for you? Can my new department have it? They'd send it over like 5 minutes later. But then
Right.
security, I'm like, hey, remember that policy I wrote? They'd be like, we have to do some sort of weird like panel and like big discussion and someone has to approve. I'm like, it's just a policy, guys. Like we just don't have one for that, and we should. You can't make me rewrite that crap. And it was just like security was like, no. And as a dev, I found it like I would just call up other devs and say like, hey, I'm looking at your website and you're doing this. It's super cool. How'd you do that? And they'd be like, man, let me send you my code. And
yeah, I think, I hope that the culture of like, hey, securities come in to us with that hammer, I think it's shifting. definitely where I think security wants to partner with engineering, right? Like we are kind of in this fight together. And how can we build that sustainable long-term like partnership model? I think that's where kind of the industry is headed, which I'm really excited to see. And I'm excited that Netflix Security, along with a bunch of other security teams as well, are moving in that direction.
Yes. Have you ever, as a security person, gone to go see a team and they're like, oh no, she's here. What have we done wrong? Have you ever had that reception where you're like, no, no, I come in peace?
It's interesting because I think sometimes, like when I go talk to other people, and then the first reaction is, "Hey, is this incident related?" Right? Like because every time they see me, and I've gotten into the habit of like in Slack or in any kind of comms that I use, I'll say, "Hey, this is non-urgent." Or this is urgent. So I'll try to be a lot more explicit about my ask, or I'll start with, hey, this is not incident related, or I have a quick question. So I have kind of developed that muscle so far. But I would like to think that most often when my team or I show up, mostly everyone's relieved that, okay, hey, they're here, they're going to handle it.
Yes. Have you ever, so I was reading on Twitter, this woman was saying, she's like, yeah, so I was saying goodbye to my client and out of habit I said, I love you, honey, see you tomorrow, and hung up and was like, do you ever find that you like talk to like your significant other or like your friends or you're something like, hey, hi, this isn't urgent, blah, 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 and like you forget?
This is fun. This is hilarious. And I think, yeah, and especially in the last 1 year, I think because of the pandemic, there is so much kind of merging happening, right? Like there is you're at home, but you're not available to your spouse or kids or your elderly people you're taking care of, like whoever that is, right? So I think there is a lot of kind of mixing happening, especially because of the physical separation aspect has been taken out. I think early on in my career journey, my leadership style was a strategic choice, right? I remember sometimes getting very unhelpful feedback, right? Like, oh, you smile too much or you're too serious. Like, which one is it? Like, what kind of a person do you want me to be? I think much later on in my career now, I try to kind of bring my authentic self and like really figure out, hey, this is how I am as a leader. So I think to your point, there's definitely I'm working towards like how can I just bring sort of the real Swathi to my leadership style as well.
I really like that. I like that a lot. So I
But
have
it's
like a
definitely
couple.
definitely a work in progress though. Yeah.
It takes time to just
Yeah.
develop our leadership role and be confident in the way we want to lead. And because people will always offer you friendly advice, you're doing it not the way I would do it, and therefore it's wrong.
Yes.
I want to invite everyone that is watching to ask Swathi a question and also click the thumbs up button. And also, we have a question in the chat. So it's a good one. So, what are the key questions which should be part of scoping for the ransomware incident internal? So, like a kickoff call. What would be some of the things, I guess, that you would start with from the beginning?
Yeah, I'm gonna wear my, third party like consultant hat on as well. I think first question is obviously, infrastructure risk. What kind of infrastructure there is. I think that's pretty crucial for a scoping call to do what kind of networks, data, services, endpoint. is this, Windows environment? Is this cloud? What kind of infrastructure do you have? Would be the first one. The next one is definitely based more on like partner and supply chain, right? A lot has been said about supply chain risk management program. So I think that's something to consider if you suspect that the initial vector is maybe through a third party. If it's supply chain risk, that needs to be under consideration. Obviously, the next one being, identity and access management, right? Like what are some of the failures that have happened for this to come through? So maybe focusing on that. That would be a third one. Then obviously, this a piece of response readiness, right? Like if you're in the middle of that right now, it's like limit the blast radius. So I think the scoping, once you can ask the first initial 3 question, then you immediately move to how do we contain this? How do we reduce the impact kind of radius, and then move on further.
Awesome. That was a great answer. We have more questions, but first, I want to thank our sponsor, make a small announcement, and then make your small announcement. So, first of all, thank you to ThreatFix, our sponsor, who make the most stupendous vulnerability management system this side of the galaxy. I told them I wanted it to be something fun to say, and so that's what I get to say. And actually, their product's awesome. On top of that, I am going to be keynoting the Vancouver International Privacy and Security Summit from May 5th to May 7th. I'm not going to be keynoting it that whole 3 days, just one day. And I wanted you all to know, so that's part of the Reboot Communications Company. So if you look up Vancouver International Privacy and Security Summit, so it's like kind of moves back and forth between my beautiful island of Vancouver Island, Victoria, to the mainland and back and forth. And anyway, I'm super excited as the hometown lady getting to keynote our own conference. Okay, but now I want to talk about Swathi's announcement about perhaps her team is hiring.
Thank you. Nice plug in there. Yes, we are hiring. We're looking for an engineering manager to lead the security incident response team. That's one of the teams under detection and response. This was one of the founding teams of detection and response at Netflix. So CERT for short has been here long enough, and even on the journey of maturity, we've open source Dispatch, that's our crisis automation tooling. And we've gotten so much love from the user community there. So we want to push on that. There is also the employee investigation and insider threats program there. There's also a studio incident response that we're focusing on. So it's kind of a rich problem set, and we're looking for a leader to kind of push that forward.
Do they have to move to California?
Yeah, good question. This is a California-based role.
That has always been my main problem, because California is not actually in Canada. That's my main problem with living in California. It's non-Canada. If you guys could fix that, I would be really open.
Noted. Feedback taken.
Oh my gosh. So we have 2 really awesome questions in the chat, and I'm like torn, but I think I'm going to go with Professor Black Ops first. So this is actually a question that I would love to know the answer to. So how do you handle multiple different compliance things that you have to be compliant with? So GDPR, PCI, you live in America, so there's a bunch of different states that have different rules, but Netflix is all over the world. So how do you handle all of that? That sounds hard.
Yeah, so really good question. We obviously have like amazing partners that we work with. Charles Navatu, who leads our governance, risk, and compliance program under enterprise security. We also have our internal audit team that we work with, right? Specifically around like PCI. If the foundations of an incident response program is present, like a solid response guide and certain run books that are essential for your team to function, and that are probably on a risk scale are like high risk likely scenarios that your team wants to think through. I think those foundations are present. I do think that providing proof for PCI shouldn't be as hard, but there's obviously other challenges that come in, right? Like a lot of times I've seen in companies where IR is just done by other folks in other teams, right? Like, which is hard because that's another job that you do while you're doing a full-time job. So that becomes really hard. We obviously have an amazing legal and privacy team that we work with specifically around GDPR. We also hold kind of annual tabletops and trying to work through to improve our run books better for that one as well.
I feel like, as well as the incident responder, you're responding to security incidents as opposed to necessarily compliance requests, right? And so, although your company as a whole needs to be PCI compliant and be doing these things,
Of course.
it's just like if there's a problem with credit cards, you have to respond to the incident. But I don't know. I actually read the PCI compliance stuff recently because I'm making a training program for devs, and there's not really that much that is. It's more like having things ready before the incident happens, right? Like, there's you have to have antivirus or whatever, or you have to do this, you have to do that. You have to have an AppSec program, basically, like a secure system development life cycle. You have to have a certain amount of testing and this and that, but it doesn't really focus on the incident response team so much. It's more like if you have all of that stuff going on already, it might even make there be less security incidents for you to deal with if everyone else is doing their job really well. Do you think?
Yeah, and I think to your point, I think preparedness is a big piece, right? So it's that, if you have the foundational aspects of that, hopefully. And I do think there are some reporting requirements around if the incident specifically was around certain data fields or things like that. I think that kind of feeds into GDPR and PCI as well. For sure, as the detection and response team, you definitely have to consider that as part of your incident handling life cycle.
Smart. I like it. Okay, so we have a bunch of questions, and then I also have all of my questions. So first of all, let's do the cheese question, Ben, because okay, so when sometimes you say something in one episode off the cuff, and then you have to do it for
Yes.
31 episodes. And
Gotta
so
do it.
the cheese question is about like if your job pays well. So it's not I make this much per year, but
Yeah.
when you go to the grocery store, can you buy any cheese you want? Like,
That's tough. I had such a, my parents are two teachers who then became professors. So I come from really humble, beginnings in India, and then I moved to the United States. I don't think I'll ever be like, give me the most expensive cheese on the aisle. But if I'm celebrating something, yes, my job pays really well, and I would say, yep, hand me that cheese. Though I'll be like, oh my god, that's a bit of money for a block of cheese.
yeah. I went to Costco the other day and they had paneer, and I was just like,
Yes.
what? That's so much paneer. And I was like, you can't eat that much paneer, Tanya. What are you
It's a lot.
doing? You can't eat that much. You're not Costco level paneer. Calm down. And so I didn't buy it despite the fact that it's so good.
But I think, yeah, I've been really fortunate and privileged to work at a place that values the skill set that you have, and also presents you with growth opportunities. And I think I was really lucky to also move through different kind of technical domains early on in my career that kind of landed me here at Netflix.
So actually, there's like 3 questions in the chat now, but I'm going to
Okay.
ask my question because guess what? I'm the host and I get to do that. so before we went live, we talked a little bit about your career leading up to this. And so one of the questions I always like to ask is, what types of experience should someone try to get that could lead up to your job, and what types of experience do you have, and like how did it help you get to where you are? And you can answer that however you desire.
Yeah, no, really great question. So I think there is sort of a conventional traditional kind of path that you could take, as an entry into the career. I think a security operations center, if there is a multi-tier SOC, I think that would be a great entry point to come in, start doing log analysis, and kind of slowly move through that. I didn't take that route, so I also want to chat a little bit about there are other ways to kind of get into the field as well. Honestly, when I decided to get into security, I kind of didn't know there was AppSec, there was detection and response, there's platform security, there is identity and access management. From the outside looking in, okay, it's cyber security, right? Like information security. So I got an internship. So I went to grad school after my bachelor's. I worked as a Java developer, and then I immigrated to the United States to do my master's in information security. And I thought, hey, this is going to be expensive, so I better pick an area where even if there is a recession and things like that, I might be able to find something so I can pay off my loans. So I was in the East Coast in the Washington, D.C. metro area, and I started as an intern for a company called Apt Associates, and then they hired me full-time as a security analyst. So that was my kind of first job, right? Like where I was a risk management kind of analyst. I also would look through snort logs. I would deploy QRadar. So I got to do a little bit of everything. We were bootstrapping the security program. So from there, I moved to a security engineer role where I did application security, right? Like web application testing, penetration testing, things like that. And then there at corporate executive board and now Gartner, I then moved into a senior security engineer role where I could do, antivirus, and I could do, two-factor authentication setup and things like that. And then I moved into my first management position there. So at the end of my career at Gartner, I was an associate director of security, managing application security, identity and access management, and then client security engagement. So that early part of my career, I got a lot of experience trying to build a proactive security program on the proactive side of the house. Where I was weak at was on the defense side of things, right? Like how do you run defense operations? And I was kind of thinking through what I wanted to do next, and the Mandiant opportunity came up. So I got the opportunity to be a third-party managed defense consultant with Mandiant. And then I moved from being a manager to an individual contributor and being a consultant. And that was, I think, by far, I describe that as the worst and the best job of my life. Best job because it was just, you are in the front lines, you are helping clients, you really know what's going on, you're a strategic partner to your clients. You understand how security works, not in one company, but at 22 different environments and companies that you support. So I have kind of, I did proactive security and then kind of moved to the defense side of the house. You can completely start on the defense side of the house and move into the career, move into this position as well.
You are like ridiculously qualified. Like, just everyone get out of her way. Swathi's here. That is awesome. Oh my gosh, you have an amazing career path. Wow. Okay, so we have more questions in the chat, and it's only fair that I let them ask questions too.
Yes.
Okay, so there's really good ones. So is there any way or like a simulation of instant response that we could practice or try out to see if our interests truly lie in instant response? Is there a way to safely practice, but like learn about it and try it?
Oh, a really great question. I do think, I'm sure where you're at currently, whatever company, whatever role you're working at, someone somewhere is doing incident response, even if it's not called the incident response team, or there might be a team that does it. One of the best things to do is incident responders always love help. We almost always will be waiting if someone says, "Hey, can I help you?" We're like, "Yes, please, please." So I think one easy way to say is, "Hey, can I scribe for you?" So note taking is, I can't tell you how much cognitive load it reduces on the incident responder. At the same time, person who's taking really good notes really understands what's going on, right? Because that text is gonna be helpful while writing executive comms, while maintaining this, detailed investigation timeline. So I think just raise your hand and say, "Hey, can I scribe for you? Can I take on that role?" Even if you want to shadow someone, I think that's another great opportunity. It's tough because I think for a few weeks you might have to do that job plus your job, but I do think that'll help get your feet wet and figure out if that's the right field for you.
That's
And
literally
also,
what I did.
yeah,
No,
great.
please
And I
continue.
think, yeah, one quick side note on that. Generally, exhaustion and the burn and turn is real, but if you also have a very healthy on-call balance and cycle, it can be a very rewarding field to be in.
Awesome. I have another suggestion. So there is this game called Backdoors and Breaches, and it's by Black Hill Security, and you can buy it on Amazon for $12. And then I live in Canada, so the shipping was $8, but it's totally worth $20. And it's an instant response tabletop game. And so you can, I realize right now, meeting with other humans in person is not cool. That said, ooh, and we just put it into the chat how you can get that. So I'm just going to add that to the screen. Oops, there we go. Um, it's fun to try out instant response. And if there's like a local security meetup, I know meeting in person is not cool right now, but you could probably do it over Zoom or something like that. And then you could all talk about it and like do the security exercise or tabletop exercise or simulation. Everyone kind of calls it different stuff, but it's super fun because you might not work in a place where you can volunteer to work with the team. But like Swathi said, literally I just asked, like, could I just come and see? And then there was code. And I'm a nerd, so I could read the code. And it was obfuscated, but I'm so nerdy I could still read it. I'm like, oh, that's SQL injection. And they're like, they'll look at me like, excuse me, the lady at the back, what are you talking about? I'm like, dun, 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 dun. And they're like, you're on the team now. I'm like, it was very exciting, I have to tell you. Oh, and apparently they have an online version of this game as well. So if you don't work at a place, this is an option for you. Okay, so we have more questions, and they're really good, Swathi.
Please.
Okay, so over the in your team over the years, which candidates were successful, and what were their attributes that kind of made them awesome, and what types of candidates were unsuccessful, and what attributes might have led to that?
Wow, such a great question. I think we talk about kind of, being calm under pressure. It's really hard, and it's definitely a muscle that you exercise. So I think if you generally have that ability, that's great. Exercise that muscle often. You'll get great at that. And if you think, oh no, I get really nervous, I get stressful like easily, that's still okay though, because a lot of times it could be different levels based on, hey, this is a job, this is something that I do, and you do that kind of long enough, it works out. Generally, I think what kind of attributes don't work well is in an incident setting if you can partner and work with other teams, right? Like, so that cross-functional collaboration piece, I would say, is very key. One other attribute that works really great in incident response is like if you have previous like infrastructure background, like if you come from like, hey, you've managed infrastructure before, or you've done DevOps before, you really understand how systems interconnect and how they work. That's quite beneficial, and I've seen that work really well within the team. And I think one other point I wanted to make was, in detection response, this field is wide and rich with some core technical skills, right? Like software engineering, incident handling, forensics, doing investigations, intelligence analysis, log analysis, infrastructure, automation. Any and all of these technical skills will translate into a role in detection response. A combination of few of these skills will definitely put you at the top.
Oh, I love it. That's such a good answer. And it also just feels like gives me lots of hope. For
Yes.
like so many people, not just me, I have a job, but sometimes when I talk to people, I'm like, your job's so cool. Do I need to keep? No, 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 I have a job. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so we have two questions in the chat where I'm concerned that they are things that you aren't allowed to answer.
Okay,
So I'm gonna ask them, and if you're not allowed to answer, you just say I'm not allowed to answer that.
that sounds good.
Because I know, like, obviously, I do want to know all the secret security things of Netflix, but
Yeah,
obviously, she's not allowed telling us. So,
yeah.
okay, so one is, how do you defend against the distributed nature of Netflix? So you have ASNs, IPs, and caches distributed throughout the world, direct connections to the internet with a drop shipped box and a thumb drive boot. So I don't know what the drop shipped box and thumb drive boot is about, but um, what types of things, I guess, do you do because it's distributed in nature, if you're allowed to share any of that?
Yeah, I think I'll give you a very high level answer, which you probably heard me say this before. This is definitely a team effort, right? Our product and application security team works really closely with our rest of engineering team, right? Like our enterprise security teams works really closely with our studio partners and with our employees. We have a user-focused security program that's focused on, hey, how can we bring security relevant information to our employees in a very non-annoying way, right? And we also have, huge open connect team, right? Like who is responsible for our content delivery. And they have kind of baked in security there as well. And we have our device and content security teams that also do sort of this work. So answer to this question is there is a big team that's focused on this. But I think one thing that I want to point out is, like, at scale, you'll see probably, even other Netflix leaders talk about at scale quite a bit, because we are focused on building services at scale.
That is a thing that they drilled into me at Microsoft quite a lot.
Yeah.
And then when I said I was leaving to start my own company because then I could scale better, they were like, "That's not what we meant."
Yes.
But they're very supportive. But I totally get it, right? Like, to be able to serve a reliable service that's secure and safe to use to everyone all over the planet. Oh yeah, that is a big job.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to do one more question where I think you might not be able to answer it, but we'll see. And then I have questions. I have so many questions, but apparently, eventually the show's supposed to end. I'm just like looking. I'm like, I have so many. I have to pick my favorite ones. Okay. So again, if you can't answer this, just say no.
Yep.
How is the coordination between the AWS security team and then also the Netflix incident response team? And what are the pros and cons? So, I mean, I used to work at Azure and I definitely couldn't talk about those things, but like there must be some sort of coordination so you don't step on each other's toes or where you alert each other to potential issues.
No, I think, it is a partnership, right? Like, and I think we should talk about kind of internal security teams and vendor partnerships. I think with me previously being at Mandiant on the other side of the house and now being in an internal security team, I've definitely like seen the struggle. So obviously AWS, it's public knowledge that it's a big partner of Netflix, right? Like same thing, we also work with few other vendors, specifically in my team's area as well. Um, I think really like how can we build a relationship based on transparency, right? Like at the same time, like we want to pull someone into an incident, we have to give them the right context of, okay, what are we trying to solve for, and how are we going to get there? So I think it's no different with any other folks that are involved with an incident, right? How can we all kind of move towards the resolution that we want to get to?
Yeah, because you don't want to do anything that's going to harm AWS, right? Like you want to do good by them just as they want to do well by you. I don't know if the word is well or good, but
Yeah,
sometimes
it's
I struggle with
definitely, yeah.
grammar.
It's definitely, a great partnership, and a mutual bi-directional partnership.
That's cool. Okay, so there's a bunch of thank yous in the chat about
Oh,
how your
thank you,
answer is
everyone.
just so excellent, and how really by sharing information we move security forward. And also, Jason mentions that Netflix has always been his favorite like learning opportunity. So the Netflix security team has their own YouTube channel now. Are you allowed to tell us a little
Yes.
bit about that? Because it's awesome.
Yes, please. No, yeah, obviously, good. Really, we really try to, upload sort of our latest talks and content on there. So please check out our YouTube channel. I think recently we did a really interesting panel with few other CISOs around challenges, the communication challenges in security. So you should find that one there as well. Yeah, and a few others. So yeah, please check it out.
Oh yeah, the AppSec team has so many cool talks.
Yes.
They have so many cool talks. I love it when Asta gives a talk. She's amazing.
Asta is amazing, and her team is incredible. To your point, AppSec has done some really really awesome work. So yeah, please check out Asta's talk as well.
Yeah, there's so many cool. I actually often use Netflix as an example when I talk to different groups to explain like, see, here's a company that is sharing lessons learned, sharing information, creating actual tools and then open sourcing them and making them free for our industry. Yep. They're pushing our industry forward in like such a positive way. Why aren't other companies doing this? Because there are companies where they'll make a security tool internal and then they won't share it. And I'm like, really, why not? Because you could, because what you built is amazing. And I love that Netflix is doing that. I'm such a huge fan of the sharing of information, like the super high quality content that I've seen coming out of there. So it's cool to be able to say it to a Netflix person.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate all the kind words, and especially everyone who's listening. Thanks for the kind words in the chat as well.
Okay, so I have the most difficult but also best question ever because it is a two-parter. So, what is your favorite thing about doing your type of work? And then what is your least favorite, like the worst part of doing your type of work? And it's okay if they're the same thing.
Yeah, totally. Honestly, the best part about my work right now is really like my team. I'm really proud of the team that we've built. It's a really, cognitive diversity is the cornerstone of our team. So Ashley's on the team who comes from NASA. Like Chris Long is on the team who's built scale systems before at Facebook, and Palantir, and Mark is on the team, and Jason, and Forrest comes from academia. Kevin came from financial institution. Shannon comes from working at an insurance company before, and how do we apply risk to here, right? Like, so it's a group of really diverse folks coming together, have software engineers, have security engineers, and then we have a technical program manager. So it's a really mix of different skill sets. So I think I'm really proud of the team that we've built here at Netflix. The worst part, the least thing that I love about my job, I think this is not specifically about my current job. It was, I think, in my previous role as a consultant, it was definitely exhausting. And my daughter at the time was very young. So I definitely felt like an absentee mom sometimes. It would be maybe a couple of days of travel, maybe 2 trips a month, but over 2 years, they really added up. Multiple dinners. My husband has been inside the restaurant alone himself eating, and I'm outside on a call. I think one of the big things why I moved from that role to the next one was, like, Tanya, if you would have asked me, okay, what did you build in those 2 years? I won't be able to show you anything. I helped a bunch of clients. Hopefully they'll have great things to say. And, we helped them through a very difficult situation. But I think coming to Netflix, I had the opportunity to build the detection and response team and kind of mature that program. So I have something to show for. So that challenge was exciting.
That's awesome. And yes, I remember I did instant response on my doctor saying, I need you to stop doing that. I need you to find a new doctor.
Yes.
I would just get so stressed, but so excited because I find it fascinating and interesting and exciting to be in the middle. But some people are good at calming down, and I'm not one of them. And so you really,
That's a strength, to your point, like to
yeah,
be able to recognize that and say,
yeah.
hey, how do I kind of want to move? And to be able to do that, I think is incredible.
Oh yeah, I think you made excellent choices, and I think Netflix is really lucky to have you.
Ah, likewise.
So there are more thank yous in the chat. I want to thank you, but first, before we say goodbye, how can people learn more about you or follow you? Do you have perhaps a Twitter handle?
Yes, so that's at Swathi Joshi. I'm not as active on Twitter, but yes, you'll definitely find me on LinkedIn. Please reach out. If we can connect one-on-one, that would be great. So yeah, LinkedIn and Twitter.
Do you have a website?
I don't have a website. I think some of the talks and some of the written content should be all linked from my LinkedIn profile.
Okay, perfect. Because I want to go watch them.
Yes, but website, that's a good idea.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being on the show. This has been so fascinating. Clearly, like the audience, so many questions. I didn't even get to all of them. Sorry to everyone who I didn't get to your questions because I was selfish and I wanted to ask my own questions. Thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure. I really appreciate you being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Tanya, and everyone's watching. Thanks for spending an hour with me. I appreciate it.
Awesome. So, bye. Thank you for being on the We Hack Purple podcast. This week, we had Swathi Joshi of Netflix, who leads the detection and response team at Netflix, and from what it sounds like, so much more. Thank you to our sponsor, Threadfix, powered by Denim Group. We really appreciate your sponsorship of our podcast. Up next week, we have Annie Hedgepedge. I'm totally saying that wrong, and I'm sorry. Hedgepeth. She's a senior cloud automation engineer, and I'm really excited to ask her all sorts of cloudy questions. The week after that, we have Kession Bennett, and we're going to learn about just basically being a senior consultant, but specifically cloud security engineer, which is slightly different than what Anne does, but also they'll have different viewpoints on it, and I'm really excited about that. April 29th, we have Zenobia Godstock, and she is a CEO of Zeg Communications, and she's going to tell us what it's like to found a great big huge company. They do digital marketing, PR, and incident response. And it's pretty exciting. And then the following week, we have Abby Aurora. We were supposed to have him on a few months ago, but then all sorts of stuff happened. Specifically, there was a tornado, and he was it wasn't. There was the California wildfires, and he was evacuated hours before the podcast. So we finally getting him back on, and he's the CPO of Cloud Defense and also my friend. So that's pretty exciting. I want to thank everyone who has been watching and listening to the We Hack Purple podcast. I really appreciate it. I want to thank everyone who came to the previous Alice and Bob Learn Application Security live stream. We have another one in just over a week. You can sign up to be invited to it at aliceandboblearn.com, and you can come join me and a whole bunch of friends, including Nancy Gariche of the OWASP DevSlop project, which is really exciting. And a whole bunch of my other friends, and we're going to just nerd out about security requirements. Thank you so much. We Hack Purple really appreciates you, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Until then, have fun securing all the things.